So I think it's happening. The EBU's 96th General Assembly has met in Prague and voted on a few major changes, including one that admits Canada, and specifically CBC Radio Canada, as a full-fledged member of the EBU. With this change, Canada now only has to announce that they will participate in Eurovision, and there's nothing stopping them. There's no need for a special invitation, as with Australia. Canada, as a full EBU member, can just decide whenever it likes to join the party. I am incredibly excited. I'm going to read you off part of the EBU's press release just so we can get the details of exactly what happened today. There was a revision to the framework that allowed member countries to essentially become full-fledged EBU members if they met two criteria. The first is that they have a public service media system aligned with core Council of Europe standards, and the second was formal observer status with the Council of Europe. Because Canada and CBC Radio Canada met those two provisions, they are now a full-fledged EBU member. What does that mean? Well, there's a lot to the EBU besides Eurovision, and so far CBC Radio Canada has mentioned that they are joining those programs and initiatives. This includes the Eurovision News Exchange, which is not exclusively about the Eurovision Song Contest. It is in fact a platform that allows the various public broadcasters to join forces, swap and share information through this news exchange, as well as the Euro Radio Music Exchange system. I'm not too sure exactly the details of that because I care about the Eurovision Song Contest most of all. And for that, all we have to go on is an email from the CBC that mentions that they will have more to announce about the Eurovision Song Contest very soon. Here's hoping. As I mentioned in my Is Canada Joining Eurovision video way back at the start of this channel, there's a bunch of things that go into sending an act to Eurovision. I don't doubt that at the moment the CBC is looking at budgets and spreadsheets and figuring out if they've got the funds and how they want to approach participation in the Eurovision Song Contest. It will be the first debut of a new country at Eurovision since Australia in 2015, which is very exciting as someone who is half Australian, half Canadian now that I'm a citizen of both countries. No doubt once the CBC has figured out exactly what's happening, we will get a statement on Canada's participation in Eurovision. There's kind of nothing to do but wait, but we can of course do the fun thing that YouTubers love to do, which is speculate. I can see this playing out a couple of ways. Given that we're only a month out from last year's contest, it is very possible that Canada swings into the 2027 Eurovision season perfectly. There's a couple of questions that will need to be answered first. First of all, would Canada use a national final system to select a song that they would send to Eurovision? Or will the CBC ask artists to submit songs and then internally select someone to represent Canada? Even before that, there's a question of, will they hit 2027 or do they want to take an extra year to prepare for a really spectacular and breathtaking debut in 2028? I really think that 2027 is where they will head, especially given what we know about the budget that was passed last year and Canada's exploration of participation at the contest this year, which were news stories that kind of filtered through over the last 12 months. There's also the question of, given it is a debuting country, whether or not the EBU would potentially grant Canada sort of a golden ticket straight to the grand final, an automatic qualification. They did this with Australia's special invitation in 2015. They said, Australia, you can compete at Eurovision because we loved you so much. However, you're just going to appear in the grand final. You don't need to qualify. It wouldn't surprise me if that did happen, but also I can see them saying, welcome to the party, prove you're good enough just like everyone else has to. Now, a question I imagine a lot of people will be asking, exactly who is Canada going to send to Eurovision? We are getting over our skis at this moment, but that's the fun part of being excited about news. Come on, guys, let's figure it out. There's a couple of different options that I can see Canada going with. You only get one chance to make a debut, so there is a chance that the Canadian and CBC team, should they debut at Eurovision 2027, will send a Canadian juggernaut. Now, it may not surprise you to know that some of the biggest musical acts in the world presently are Canadian. Even going back, 30, 40, 50 years, there's some truly monstrous mega acts that come from Canada. Celine Dion famously has already won Eurovision on behalf of Switzerland in 1988. Do I think that they could get Celine back? No. Let Celine, like, rest and relax and follow where life wants to take her. I don't think Celine Dion is coming back to participate at Eurovision. However, there's a bunch of other famous Canadian names in the pop music scene. I'm just gonna slap a bunch of them here. There's every chance that CBC might be able to convince someone like Carly Rae Jepsen or BB No Money, or even a throwback favorite like Shania Twain or some such to show up for Eurovision. This would be, I don't know how to say it, kind of a stunt. You know what I mean? A big splashy debut. I was at dinner earlier with my Canadian friends and I mentioned that, you know, Australia, we sent our first winner of Australian Idol, Guy Sebastian, who was a household name for many, many years. Who's the Canadian Idol winner? And no one had an answer for me. They didn't know, and I don't know either. But I think we can say that they'll look to send, if they want to make a splash, someone who's a bit of a household name. Especially because it's a debut year, and especially because they would have an automatic qualification to the final, perhaps. That could be a draw that gets a bigger name on board. Whereas if the negotiations are such that you're going through the semis like everyone else, perhaps we'll see a more national final focused approach. Who can tell? Now there's a bunch of names that are in sort of a tier of Canadian music where I think they are less globally successful and more known within Canada, but these would be acts that have more of an independent kind of artistic edge to them. Immediately, there were two names I thought of when I went, who would I love to see represent Canada at Eurovision? I'm gonna shout them out super quick. First one, I think, is Ralph, who is a Toronto-based singer. I've seen Ralph perform live a couple of times. Their music style is incredibly pop. It's incredibly well polished. She can dance, she can move, she's really down to earth. It was a great show. Her music is some of my favorite on the Canadian music scene. Definitely a kind of approach that I could see Canada taking. The second name I thought immediately who would be amazing to send to Eurovision on behalf of Canada is Ali X. Now, Ali's had a larger exposure. She collaborated with Violet Chachki, a winner of RuPaul's Drag Race, on a single a few years ago, but her recent albums have been truly spectacular. Some of my favorite Canadian music ever. Her song Galena especially is such an interesting retro throwback. Casanova is a dance floor bop, and she has this very unique visual style, a very unique fashion sense, such a strong point of view that I think she would serve Canada really well. However, maybe not in a debut year. It feels like a debut year a country would want to put its best foot forward and say, this is who we are, really explode onto the scene, and maybe that means more of a bigger name. Should Canada decide to go through the more indie route, those are the names that I think would be fantastic. And then, of course, should there be a national final, all bets are off. There are people in their garages, in their living rooms, making phenomenal music right now that I think would be fantastic. Part of the joy of Eurovision is discovering new music and new musicians that came up through the process. My favorite song from this Eurovision season was Count Kylie's Te Un Tagad, which didn't even make it to Eurovision from Latvia this year. So I cannot wait for Canada to participate more fully in Eurovision. Whether we get the announcement that Canada is going to participate in Eurovision this week, this month, or later this year, maybe even next year, I know it's going to be worth the wait. Such an exciting time to be a Canadian Euro fan. I hope you'll like and subscribe to this channel to stay tuned for a Canadian's perspective on Eurovision. Not only am I excited, Jonas the cat is very excited as well. He cannot wait to see the maple leaf on the Eurovision stage.